Hello, I think we're live. We are. If you're tuning in and you are listening in and you can hear me very well, please just say hello, give us a like. I'm sorry for being a couple of minutes late. I actually broke my tripod clip trying to get my phone into the tripod holder. And then I realized that the white t-shirt I was wearing before this white t-shirt was dirty because I had spilt my meal on it. And then as I was getting the second tripod out to film this, I leant into a cupboard that was dirty. So now I've just got this like new stain on another white t-shirt. Anyway, we are here. I am here. I never thought it would get to this. 2 t-shirts, 2 tripods, but this video is going live whether we like it or not. So this is my 7th live video, which is exciting. Coaches Q&A, it's my turn, and what better way I think is to coerce you guys into being involved in these Q&As in a way that helps you specifically by giving you a topic. So I thought, why not open up that Pandora's box and talk about hormones? Because lo and behold, obviously I specialize in women who have PCOS and the like, but in conjunction with that, because I know so much about it, I also have quite a lot of knowledge in my head that relates to hormones and women's menstrual cycle and how that all works. And given that there's a good portion of women in our group that are, females versus males, what better way than to have a bit of a safe space to talk about some of these really, difficult questions, and, somebody like me can just go for broke. So thank you for the ladies that sent in their questions. We had Jill, we had Maria, and we also had Melissa. So I'm going to answer all your questions. And in relation to this hormone topic, what I started to notice was a little bit of a trend in the context of the questions that were being asked. And so what I wanted to do was come into these questions and answering them for you, which I will, but add in a lot of extra context, because there's a lot of very similar things that and information that I thought would be really helpful for everyone just listening in, but also walking into specific questions and having that background information. So with women compared to a man, let's have a look at their hormonal platform. So compared to a male typically produces the same amount of hormones day in and day out. A man will just typically flatline every day of the year. A woman's hormonal graph is cyclical. So if you have a look at our menstrual cycle in what we see it, there's pretty much 4 main hormones, which is your estrogen, progesterone, the luteinizing hormone, and the follicle stimulating hormone. You might know them as LH and FSH, but they're sort of the typical main 4 hormones that make up our menstrual cycle. Now, if you have a look at a man's graph who's just typically they're producing the same amount of hormones day in, day out, if you compare that to a female's, what you'll notice is that our graph will be showing one hormone that's like this. The next hormone will be like this. Another hormone might be like this. And then another hormone might be like that. So we are quite different in the amount of hormones that we produce at different parts of our monthly cycle. And we're producing different amounts at different times, and nothing is ever seemingly in sync compared to what a male is. Of course, it's in sync for what our bodies need to do, but in that comes different symptoms of a female's bodily functions that we experience at different times of the month. So I thought I would just really highlight that, because our bodies are producing different types of hormones, different types of the month, which is where we notice for each and every individual woman will notice a different function. And then it's going to be different again in terms of symptoms, in terms of how your body is functioning, whether you are overproducing or underproducing hormones that you should be, or perhaps producing the hormones at the wrong time. So for hormones that should, start off very slow and then increase before it gets to the top, you might find that your increase happens a lot quicker than what it should. So your body is producing hormones at the wrong time. So, hormones, they all respond off the back of this. And the main ones that come off the back of those 4 hormones that I spoke about is cortisol and insulin. So whilst we need all those hormones to be seemingly looking a bit all over the shop, if you are overproducing or underproducing or producing at the wrong time, your other hormones will respond off the back of that. And those 2 are cortisol and insulin. So you take that bag of chemical soup that we talk about so often in our learning materials and, us as coaches, it's only here where it becomes prevalent that no 2 women are the same in terms of our menstrual health and what we notice about our bodies in how they go through our cyclical phase. Now, I'm just going to mention that now because I thought that kind of context relates to all of those questions submitted and just give you a little bit of extra leverage and knowledge of, how and why things happen the way they do and why a lot of women are, find themselves different to others. So let's get into the questions that have been sent in. Excuse me while I get them up. So I'm going to hit Jill's question first. Jill has put in a question saying, what can cause bloating during a monthly cycle? Could it be lots of different things, or is it possibly hormone related? So putting it very simply, yes, everything is hormone related. And firstly, very small amounts of bloating is normal. Small amounts is probably where I'm highlighting it here. So what I'm not saying is that waking up in the morning and just being bloated to, you're like 7 or 8 months pregnant, that kind of bloating is not normal, but certainly small amounts of uncomfortability in the lower abdomen and bloating around that area is relatively normal. So the body pretty much is going under during that time where our body is going through a very strategic series of muscle contractions to shed our lining, which is what we see as blood. For every man that's watching this, it is perhaps going to get a little bit gross, but this is just how we work. So we shed that lining that we see as blood, and to get there is a very strategic series of constant muscle contractions for our body to let that lining go, and to then over the course of say 5 to 7 days, depending on how long your period actually lasts, that's how long those muscle contractions are going for. So it's actually kind of a big deal for our body to have a period. There's a lot of processes happening under the skin that we certainly may not be aware of, that's actually involved to let our body shed that lining so it can go away, clean it all, to then go ahead and do it again the next month and build that lining up before letting it go the next time. So in terms of bloating, those muscle contractions can certainly bring on small amounts of that bloating, which is what in the medical world they consider as relatively normal. It doesn't interrupt your ability to eat anything. It doesn't affect your energy levels. It doesn't impact anything else. It's just that you wake up one morning and you can just feel it there. It doesn't impact your day. But there are other contributing factors, which is certainly where a lot of people find themselves a bit confused as to whether or not this is directly related to their menstrual health, or if it's related to, some other factors. And I think that first and foremost, what a lot of women don't realize is that one of the main contributing factors is the bloating around that time, is that our digestive system, for for some women, our digestive system does take a small shift. But it's enough to notice the bloating. So where we feel like you're not digesting and your body's not chewing through food as well as what it would. It might be slower, or it might seemingly, your digestive system might increase the way in which it processes food, but it's enough to notice that bloating and increase the symptom a little bit more. So it might just amplify it. And that's where you just see that change in appetite. You feel like your stomach's just bigger and fuller, even though you may not have eaten as much as what you normally would have. Now, another one is water retention. So off the back of our digestive system just taking a very small shift that is just enough to notice that bloating a little bit more, there is a lot of water retention going on. Now, our body knows that in order to do those muscle contractions and to be shedding the lining and going through that hormonal stage, there is a lot of inflammation in that hip area, in your pelvis, in your lower abdomen, lower back. So there is a small element of water retention. But there's actually used at the time to help pick up and circulate those inflamed androgens that occur in the process of us trying to shed our lining. And the water retention is used like a bit of a storage system, you could say, to help pick up the androgens, circulate them in the water so that they can be moved out of our pelvic region and out of that area to be eliminated from our body as waste. So it either comes out as poop or pee. But that water retention is like a bit of a strategic, way that our body is going to uses to eliminate that inflammation. Now, that water retention often shows up as bloating as well. And because we've taken a very small digestive shift, and it's usually just in our muscle contractions, because our digestive system is based on a whole heap of muscle contractions as well, that little shift plus a little bit of water retention is enough for women to be like, what the fuck? Now, what I also want to bring attention to is, probably that elephant in the room, which is the food influence. So if your insulin is, say, already unbalanced, whether it's you're overproducing or underproducing, or it's just completely unbalanced no matter which way you look at it, you're going to notice a drop in your insulin, which is going to show up, and your brain is going to try and tell you that you've got an insulin drop in terms of cravings. Now, if you are going to give in to those cravings and really listen to them and be very susceptible to them, and you go ahead and you eat, processed crap, some really processed sugar-loaded things, what that does to an already sensitive digestive system is it's going to react. So for every other day of the year or month, let's call it, where you are able to consume those foods and digestive system gets through it, if your digestive system is changes in terms of the muscle contractions and the way that the acids and everything is working, and you give into eating more processed crap, an already sensitive digestive system ain't going to be much of your friend. Now, if you've increased just the amount of processed crap that you're eating just because you got your period and you think that that's the right thing to do, or you're just giving in to eating that type of food, processed shit just gives you a bellyache anyway. It's just that if it's already inflamed, it's going to become more noticeable. So that's pretty much how off the back, Jill, bloating sort of happens. Actually, another one I do want to probably mention is dehydration. So I think that for a lot of women, if we're already bloated, we're already seemingly retaining water, our belly's just, it's not really getting through those vegetables very well. It's trying to munch through that fiber. What we don't typically do is continue to drink water or liquids in itself. So our body actually becomes quite dehydrated. So if we're already bloated, we don't usually want to drink any more water, which tends to help the bloating linger longer than what it would have if we continued to drink water all the way through our cycle normally. Now, I'm not talking about drinking gallons and gallons of water in one hit, because that's not needed, but certainly sticking to staying hydrated. So whether it's just slowly sipping water progressively throughout the day, that's usually a really good way to try and manage that hydration. Now, the overall solution to just keep those cravings from really rearing their head is to stick to the rules of the meal construction, with, I feel like, a very heavy focus on omega-3, because bloating as it is a series of hormonal reactions which are going to happen regardless, but the amount of androgens and inflammation that gets built up in that area, along with our digestive system just taking a small shift, it's important to really focus on the meal construction. So lots of leafy greens, lots of vegetables and fruits, and your proteins as well. But I find that omega-3 is just incredibly amazing for being able to pick up with the water retention our body is just doing on a very subliminal level. The omega-3 plus a lot of hydration in that area is great for just picking up that unwanted waste in our body and pushing it out the door a little bit quicker than what it would be normally if we're not having a high level of omega-3. Now, I'm not saying you need to increase it at the time. You don't need to do anything drastic, but the benefits of this are found in a consistent intake of omega-3. So our body is always getting rid of waste all the time, so that when those androgens and those inflammation really hits that area, it's already preloaded with enough vice to just continue moving it along, so it doesn't stay dormant as long as what it would. So that's my solution. And honestly, if you are having extreme bloating in any parts or periods of your cycle that isn't being managed, and it's really extreme, it's really uncomfortable, it's probably worth having a chat with one of us so that we can really hone in on your food diaries over the course of 3 or 4 months even, just to see if there's any trends that somebody experienced can pick up on that you may not have realized. So if there's anything outside of that, Jill, just hit us up, don't be afraid, and we can top on top of that. But honestly, I feel like omega-3 is just one of those ones where it gets a bit left behind, so it's really good to just stay on top of it all the time, and that way you're already armed with all of the good stuff 24/7 to just keep those inflammation androgens moving out of the body. I hope that answers your question. Melissa sent in a question. Thank you. Melissa's question was, what is the best way to deal with cravings caused by stress and appetite-related hormones such as cortisol? I'm looking for in-the-moment tips as well as long-term habits and strategies that can be used to regulate stress. So I love talking about stress and the connection between cravings and all that. It's a little bit of it's a bit weird. You might think it's weird, but I kind of like it. And Melissa, I know you're relatively new to the MP world, I think around June, pretty sure, maybe July. And what I love about this is that you've asked a really good question. And I love that, and I know that you're already gaining some really good improvements, and all of this is going to be of a great benefit to you in this domain as well. So cravings, they come about from 2 places. One is the emotional habit of eating something. So you are always used to eating something in a certain part of the month, a certain time of the day or part of the week. And that emotional craving is our brains confusing it with an actual craving. The second type of craving is a hormone stimulated craving, which is the message your brain is emitting to say, hey, something's not right, my insulin is dropping, or I'm otherwise hormonally or nutritionally unbalanced. And the quickest way to fix this is by sugar and bucket loads of it. Now, sadly, our brain isn't really a great communicator. All those hormone deficiencies and nutritional deficiencies that come about, our brain will recognize and try to tell us. But the voice that we hear is always, give me sugar, or for a very small portion of people is give me salt. So your body won't ever turn around to you and say, hey, I need like some vitamin C. Can you please give me, you know, some capsicums in my next meal? You know, I'm deficient in insulin because I haven't eaten enough low energy carbohydrates, or hey, you know, it doesn't speak to us like that. Our brain always sees an imbalance or a deficiency, and the voice is always give me sugar. And I think it's about 3 or 4% of people that actually get the salt craving. Anyway, if we are under enough stress, either emotionally, physically, or both, cortisol is produced as the intention for a wet blanket to try and stop every other hormone from going like batshit crazy. So cortisol is actually produced with good intentions, and I think a lot of people kind of forget that we need cortisol in our body because cortisol is a really good regulator. But quite often, if we are under enough stress and constant stress, physically or emotionally or combination, cortisol is just like, yep, just give it to me. I want heaps. Just do it. Just flood the system. That'll fix it. And, you know, anyway, it's often too much, and that's where our cortisol rises, and the imbalance of that versus other hormones, just it creates the problem that we wanted to avoid in the first place. So our bodies are very smart, but also a little bit dumb, and it's important to sort of, the start of getting on top of that is just knowing the knowledge behind it and knowing that you are, you know, still in control once you get that. Anyway, that's the context. In the moment fixes for cravings, I like to lean on the meals that satisfy those cravings. So I'm going to assume here, Melissa, that you are a sweet person just like me. I'm like the world's actual biggest sweet tooth. Don't care what anyone says. Like, I'll wake up and I could eat a block of chocolate. I could eat lollies or sweets any time of the day and be okay with that. So when those cravings do start, I really like to lean in the moment. It's about leaning on those MP meals that satisfy those cravings. So load up on, you know, fruits, make those sweeter type of meals that address the cravings. And then there's so many different like ways you can satisfy a sweet tooth right now and still have it help you as well as, you know, do what you want it to at the time. The other option is to load up on low energy carbs to keep you full. So if you're going through a stage or a couple of days where you notice that your cravings are just a little bit more amplified, a little bit more out of control than what you're used to, load up on low energy carbs just to keep you full, because that fiber ratio really does help. It helps keep our body busy, feeding and drawing out the nutrients from all those fruits and veggies, that it doesn't have time, so to speak, to voice, hey, I want something sweet because I think I'm deficient. So yeah, I like to load up on those types of things in the moment, but the real benefits are in a long-term strategy. Because ideally you don't want the cravings to rear their head at all. So it's about that long-term strategy so that you're not even faced with that problem. So for long-term strategies for cravings, I focus again on those rules of meal constructions, and particularly narrowing in and making sure that your high energy carbs are inside your metabolic window, and all of your low energy carbs of all different varieties are everywhere else. So I feel like for a lot of women, and I'm not going to assume here, Melissa, but I've seen it before in the past. So I think it's worth probably explaining is that we think of low energy carbs, and sometimes we don't realize how deliberate we need to be in including lots of different varieties. Our body can get used to eating the same mundane, low energy carbs all the time because it's just the same delivery of nutrients, but our brain also gets a bit tired of that too. So it's about making a little bit of a deliberate effort to include different low energy carbs of all the different varieties and colors everywhere else, and that just feeds those cravings. Sorry, not the cravings, doesn't feed the cravings. It actually nullifies the insulin and repairs all those nutrient imbalances that made the cravings appear in the first place. Another one again is, I'm probably going to sound like I'm repeating myself, but omega-3. So omega-3 is that superfood for helping circulate unwanted hormones out of the body. And long-term, your hormone platform just remains more resilient. So it's good for bloating, it's good for cravings, because all those unwanted hormones, if you're producing in excess, which some women are, any of those excess hormones that just circulate through our body and cause havoc, omega-3 will just help flush it out nice and quick. It doesn't stay circulating in our body for as long as what it would have if we didn't get rid of it. Now, stress, I mean, I could go on and on about stress because I have a lot to say about it, but please don't ignore it, Melissa. Every woman thinks, and I used to be like this, which is why I know, every woman thinks they should always be walking around with a pot just constantly simmering of stress. Like your pot's just simmering all the time, and occasionally, more often than probably what we want to acknowledge, is our pot boils over and we get to that stage where we just get so stressed and that cortisol is released, insulin's trying to do its thing, all the other hormones just become so out of whack. So it's like women go around with this like badge of honor of how stressed they are. And they wear it like, oh yeah, I'm so stressed. But then on the surface, they try to make it look like they're not stressed. Physically and emotionally, we can't convince our body that it's not under stress. If it is, it is. And wearing stress like a badge of honor isn't a thing. So it's really important to not try and ignore it and really focus on taking care of yourself, to include like deliberate downtime into your schedule, and just be aware and acknowledge that your own threshold of how much stress you can commit to is actually a real thing. Not because seemingly somebody else is more stressed than you or have more on their plate than you. We all have our own different threshold, and it's important to acknowledge that. And it's probably not something that you want to just evaluate on an everyday level, but evaluate how much physical and emotional stress you go through on an overall basis. So over the duration of 2 or 3 months and even a year, and taking that time to assess your body, assess your brain, and include deliberate downtime to really allow your body to de-stress, so you can improve that ratio of downtime versus, okay, I'm stressed here, but it's short term and then I can come back down. So Melissa, I hope that helps. It was a bit of a multifocal sort of question there. So if I didn't answer something or I just completely fucked it up, please let me know. And we can keep chatting and we'll go from there. I want to try and help you. The very last question though is from Maria. Now I can just see it's getting a bit dark. One sec. That's a bit better. We've got a bit of a storm coming through, so I think it's getting a bit rainy soon. But we've got one last question, which is from Maria. Just one sec, let me bring it up. Maria, I have a lot of questions concerning hormones. No problem, throw them at me anytime. Doesn't just have to be the live chat. Just throw them down anytime. Make sure you tag me so I don't miss it, because our group is like amazingly busy. Sorry, digressing there, Maria. I have a lot of questions concerning hormones, but the first one is, how do you deal with PMS symptoms? To give some context, About a week or two before my period, I have troubles with PMS, like wanting to take a blanket and be a couch potato and a burrito and just cry and curse. Maria has supplements which take the edges off, but it's not as intense, but she wants a better way of dealing with it. So Maria, I hope that the explanation of hormones when I first started our live chat today is helpful, but I know that you're also a newbie as well. I think maybe October, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm sorry, it's hard to keep track of when people come and go. So from reading your question, it sounds like a good portion, not all of them, but a good portion of your struggles are emotional around that time of the month. Now, for some women, your time of the month might be the week before that you notice the big influx of symptoms, or it could be as soon as your period hits. There's no right or wrong. It's just everyone is, again, on their different, platform. And it's just honestly about how to manage your individual self. So it sounds like most of your struggles are emotional, which is common, but that's not to say it's normal. Because a lot of women do find that they get to a certain part of their month and their mental health really takes a dip and a dive, and it can really sort of do a 180. So for the person who has symptoms of their own, might get cravings, might get really oily skin, muscle fatigue. The other person, maybe yourself, Maria, might notice that, your mental health, the way that, you get brain fog all the time, anxiety might become a problem, the negative self-talk really, starts to shine, and that's just you on your own level. So the beauty of starting your transformation, though, is that what you're already doing is working, and by that I mean focusing on your food and exercise, and that is all extremely helpful to address your hormonal platform that is making those symptoms more amplified. So a symptom like what you experience is simply just another way that your body is reacting to an underlying hormonal imbalance. So when you're having that hormonal change and you notice that your brain just flips its coin, that's basically off the back of an underlying hormonal imbalance at that time. Now, what I notice a trend, and I certainly don't want to assume that you are this person, Maria, but it is a very large trend, and it's in that I think that it's worth being spoken about, is that I notice that if we are already inclined or predisposed or have a history of a damaged relationship with ourselves, we might hate the way we look, we always very critical of our body, our confidence is shot, you just feel like your body isn't in its best shape, and your body isn't in its best shape. So we have a really damaged relationship with ourselves, and some of it's based on reality, where we aren't in our best shape and our best health, and some of it can be brought on by ourselves. So you perceive that because you are the way you are, that therefore you don't have any confidence, or you shouldn't have confidence, and everything's just somehow like intertwined into some conflicting web. So when you hit that stage of your cycle, it doesn't actually take much stimuli to slide further into where it's those thoughts and that way of thinking for you is completely consuming. You can become easily triggered by something that somebody says, something that somebody else does, or the triggers become a bit more profound. Now, lo and behold, your ability to pick up and build those positive habits that you're working on with your food and your exercise, and the goal of getting consistent with those things, consistent with exercising how you're supposed to be exercising, eating more of the foods that you've probably been missing out on for years, and fixing those nutritional imbalances, those things already help the hormones to balance out. So it's all of a benefit, and the flow-on effect of doing those things consistently, and the back-end rewards will certainly be invisible wins for you, where you notice that your emotional platform is improving. Now, of course, when you're improving physically and you feel better, they're all followed through by a new way of, you're finding a new love for yourself and building a body that is definitely more resilient to those small tweaks in our emotional platform or even in our physical health, where you're not as affected by them as much. And by that, I'm not saying that you will always be completely immune to feeling a bit couch potato-y, a bit I can't be fucked. I think that on some levels we will always feel that way because our body is going through, a phase like that every month. It's that short straw we've been handed. But if that does present, you become more in control of your emotional platform, and you are putting yourself into a position where you're like, actually, no, these thoughts aren't real. No, I need to not focus on sitting around. I know that right now it's important for me to just keep going to the gym, even though I don't feel like it. Those types of improvements are really small wins, but they are actually much larger in the perspective what improvements you get off the back of them. So lo and behold, I think it's really worth mentioning that the repair process for this stuff is never instant. Jill, you've been around for a little while. Melissa and Maria, you're still relatively new compared to like some of us ancient people. We've been doing this for like nearly 10 years now. So, it's none of these improvements will happen overnight. They're never instant. One meal, one trip to the gym, it's never going to do it. If you've been trying to address a problem that you've had for 10, 15, maybe even 20 years, that's a lot of trauma for our body to actually have to manage and repair. So there's a whole heap of series of time and patience that has to get invested into this. So for your body to actually come back from this. But it's also very repairable. And you will notice much quicker advancements in gaining that self-control over your thoughts and eliminating the depths of how deep you slide into your thoughts emotionally for the negative things. It's very repairable the longer that you stick to the consistency, which is something that a lot of newbies, it's a battle that we all face when we start doing this stuff. We know that we can get it right, but then we know we're getting it wrong a good portion of that time as well. So addressing that consistency of just like repeating those positive habits like your life depends on it. Because it does. Like women, sure, we all want to look amazing and, function like we're supposed to, but there's a lot of layers for us, I feel like. Not saying it's women and men, but for women, there's a lot more elements that come into this. And it's just how we are. So consistently repeating those really good habits and finding yourself staying in control of the less productive habits is really like where we start to notice improvements much quicker. So yeah, I find that with this stuff relates to all the questions asked today, with those improvements won't be big, which is super frustrating, especially if you're like me, you want to notice your improvement, like you want an instant transaction. You're good for a month. You want to notice the reward in a month. It's not like that. Improvements aren't big. They just get better and better on really small scales, like each month that rolls around. Sometimes you might even stall a month or two, but then you might have an improvement on the next. It just honestly depends on how long you've had a certain symptom or a symptom, like a health struggle for, determines how long, how quickly you'll advance versus how much effort and consistency you're putting into those habits. Now, I hope that answers the questions that was sent in. If anyone has any questions off the back of this and it sparked something for yourself, or the ladies, if I didn't answer something, please just let me know. Let's keep the chat going. But this is probably a bit of a public service announcement that if you do have hormonal questions, don't be afraid to put them in the group, because for a lot of women, we are going through very similar things. And I find that these questions spoken to in a live audience is amazing, because for one thing that's affecting one person, there'll always be another person that we can help in my responses. So by putting that in the group, it just keeps helping everybody. And I'm really honest, you know, in wanting to help people like this. Obviously, this is my niche. This is what I love. And it's just another part of your transformation that is just as important. So don't be afraid to speak up. Anyway, it's been lovely having you. I'm so glad that this video didn't, I haven't spilt anything on myself anymore. But it's been great. And I think that we'll put an end to that one. And you guys have a good rest of the night. And we'll chat soon. See you, everyone.